Write something here. Never judge others by their appearance, because sometimes the people you least notice are the ones who can change your life. The story I want to share today is a profound lesson about leadership, humility, and patience. On a bustling Monday morning at St. Mary's Hospital, the air was filled with urgency and tension. Nurses rushed between rooms, doctors exchanged urgent instructions, and the waiting area was quietly filled with anxious eyes. Karen, the hospital manager, walked briskly down the hallway, the sound of her high heels clicking steadily on the shiny stone floor. She was a woman in her 40s, with a stern demeanor and an air of authority. Her sharp office attire and the file folder, always in hand, were her trademarks, much like the symbol of strictness that people often associate with Karen's name. Everything in the hospital had to follow her plan, and she had no hesitation in criticizing anyone who made a mistake. Some people called her a ruler rather than a leader, but Karen didn't care. While everyone was busy, a man walked through the hospital's front door, causing the atmosphere to shift suddenly. He was dressed very casually. A striking red MAGA hat, a simple gray t-shirt, and jeans. Under the hospital's lighting, he looked like an unwitting tourist, showing no sign of being there with a clear purpose. But Karen, with her sharp eyes, immediately noticed him, and there was something about him that made her cautious. Unbelievable, Karen thought. Walking like a soldier, her sharp eyes tracking every step of the strange man. He walked straight to the reception desk, the red MAGA hat unmistakably on his head, which Karen could not tolerate in this environment. She quickly moved toward him, showing no politeness or patience. Every step Karen took was like a hammer striking the hospital floor, attracting the attention of everyone around. "Hello," Karen said, her voice cold and stern like a police officer in a movie. "What's going on? You're in the hospital without a clear reason, and that hat, I'm sure it's not acceptable here." The man, none other than Elon Musk, looked at Karen calmly. He replied in a soft and composed tone, "I just want to take a quick look. I'm not bothering anyone. I'm not here to cause trouble." Karen scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "This is a hospital for healthcare, not a place to express political views. That hat makes me uncomfortable, and I'm sure it makes some people here uncomfortable as well." Elon looked around, noticing a few curious gazes directed at him, but his expression didn't change. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I just have some things to take care of," he replied. Karen's patience was gone. She approached him and said, her voice almost a scream, "If you don't leave right now, I'll call security." She immediately called security, instructing them to remove him from the premises. Elon smiled faintly, showing no sign of being flustered or angry. "You can do that, but remember, never judge someone by their appearance." He turned and walked away, showing no tension or anger, just chugging lightly. Security arrived promptly and escorted Elon out, but before leaving, he turned back once more and gave Karen a thoughtful glance. Karen felt she had the situation completely under control. Nothing to worry about, she thought. Smug about how she had handled it. Just some ignorant stranger. But no one expected the situation to unfold the way it did. The next day, the hospital continued its usual operations, with Karen still walking the halls with her file folder, directing all staff according to protocol. However, today, something very unusual happened. After giving some instructions, Karen overheard murmurs among the staff, who had gathered around the reception area. Annoyed, she walked over, feeling frustrated. And then she saw him. Elon Musk, still wearing the red MAGA hat, walked into the hospital calmly. This time he was not just a stranger. Elon was wearing a black suit, a stark contrast to the sportswear from yesterday. This made Karen feel like something was off. But she remained as stern as ever, walking swiftly toward him. She looked around and saw that many people had recognized Elon, their eyes filled with curiosity. "You again here once more," Karen said loudly, causing the entire area to fall silent. "I told you to leave. Why are you still here?" Elon smiled with no anger in his voice. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I have some work to do if possible. I just want to handle some matters related to this hospital." Karen stood there filled with doubt and anger. "What could you possibly do here? This is a hospital, not your workplace." Elon simply shook his head gently. "Perhaps I need to make some changes here." But this time Karen didn't hear any further explanation from Elon. She ordered security to escort him out, although she couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. This time Karen felt like she was the one who had won. She returned to her colleagues, ignoring the surprised looks they gave her. Another day passed. The next morning, as usual, Karen entered the hospital with a sense of self-satisfaction. However, today something felt strange. The hospital staff looked at her with unusual expressions. Some looked at her with curiosity, while others couldn't hide their concern. But Karen brushed it off, thinking they were just getting worked up over nothing. What would happen next? The following morning, when Karen walked into the hospital, she immediately noticed something odd. The gazes around her were no longer cold or fearful, as they usually were. Instead, there was curiosity and unspoken encouragement that Karen had never felt before. The staff looked at her with puzzling expressions, as if something was wrong, but they couldn't pinpoint what it was. Karen stood in front of her office door, frowning slightly. She had just received a notification on her phone that one of the largest hospitals in the area had invited her to attend a discussion on reforming hospital procedures and management. She quickly accepted the invitation, though she wasn't sure whether this was a good opportunity or just a joke. But what was strange was that Elon Musk had appeared. No longer just a visitor, he had become a part of the hospital's story, whether Karen wanted to admit it or not. In the afternoon, as Karen was sitting in her office, there was a light knock on the door. She turned and there he was again. "Elon Musk." "You again," Karen said, her voice cold, but there was a hint of unease in her eyes. "What do you want now?" Elon paused for a moment and then smiled. "You must have heard about the discussion I participated in yesterday, right? I was the one who proposed some reforms that could help improve the management of this hospital." Karen was surprised. Before she could say anything, Elon continued, "I want to help. I've seen opportunities to improve not just the material aspects, but also the spirit of the staff here." Karen still didn't fully understand Elon's intentions. Although her nature made her skeptical of anything unclear, curiosity was beginning to occupy most of her thoughts. Elon continued, and this time his voice softened. "You know, this hospital could change if we work together. Not just in terms of facilities, but in how we organize and work as a team. You always push everything according to strict protocols, but sometimes change is what we need." Karen looked at Elon carefully. "I don't understand what you're saying." "Managing a hospital must be done seriously. We can't just change things easily like that." Elon smiled. "You probably don't know, but there is one thing I really believe. To change the world first, you have to change yourself." A simple statement, but it made Karen think. She didn't like this kind of philosophy. It was too vague, but a part of her couldn't deny that there was something in Ellen's words that made her feel like real change was possible. A few days later, Karen received an email from the hospital about the discussion that Elon had participated in. The content of the email surprised her. The reforms proposed by Elon were not only related to technology and facilities but also focused on changing the mindset of the staff. He suggested ideas to create a more comfortable working environment, encourage creativity, and reduce stress at work. One of the proposals Elon emphasized was to apply flexible working methods, where employees could share their ideas without fearing harsh judgment. Karen couldn't help but think about these things. Was it really necessary to change the rigid processes she had spent years building? Despite her lingering skepticism, part of her felt like she was missing something. The next morning, Karen met with Elon again in an official meeting at the hospital. This time the atmosphere was different. The staff in the meeting room looked at her and Elon with special attention, as if waiting for a big story to unfold. Karen sat down in her chair, saying nothing but in her mind. She was vaguely picturing the changes that Elon might bring. "Thank you all for being here today." Elon began, his voice confident but not imposing. "Today, I want to share some ideas about how we can work more efficiently. I know this hospital is already known for its quality of work, but we all know if we don't change a few things, we might miss out on a big opportunity." Karen felt a strange wave wash over her. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down she knew Elon was right. What he was saying made her stop and think. The staff started exchanging glances, and everyone couldn't hide their excitement. "I'd like to start with a question," Elon continued. "What do you think makes a good team? Is it following strict procedures, or is it working with creativity and passion?" Karen sat still, not answering. She was still wrestling with her own thoughts. Elon looked at her, his gaze both challenging and understanding. Sometimes, Elon said softly, "we don't need to force everything to be perfect. We just need to create a space where people feel comfortable to work, to give their best." Karen felt a change within herself. Ellen's words seemed to penetrate deep into her being. Were the rigid principles and strict procedures really delivering the best results, or were they just a safety net for her? Had she been too conservative and afraid to experiment with new ideas? When the meeting ended, Karen was no longer the rigid hospital manager she once was. She saw the truth in Ellen's words. This wasn't an easy change, but it was necessary if the hospital was to grow. And she, who had always clung to inflexible processes, now realized that creativity and flexibility were what truly allowed people to progress. That day, when Karen left the meeting room, she felt like a different person. Things weren't entirely clear yet, but she began to understand that she needed to change, not just for her own growth, but also to make the hospital a place where every staff member could feel proud and encouraged. Elon had succeeded, but not through grand reforms or perfect strategies, but by helping Karen realize one crucial thing: true change begins within oneself. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the hospital's glass windows, Karen felt like a new day was beginning, filled with a different energy. The night before, she had thought a lot about what Elon had shared and the ways he suggested changing. She still didn't fully trust everything, but at least it had made her reflect on herself, on her work, and on the methods she had maintained for so many years. Were the rigid principles and impersonal procedures really suitable for this era? As Karen walked down the corridor, lost in her thoughts about the changes, she suddenly heard a familiar voice calling from behind. "Hello, Karen." Ellen's voice echoed, causing her to jump. Karen turned around and saw Elon standing there, holding a cup of coffee, smiling confidently as usual. She couldn't help but notice that Elon seemed to have become an integral part of the hospital's life. "What are you doing here again?" Karen asked, her voice somewhat cold, though curiosity gnawed at her. "Well, I'm here to see if you can join an important meeting today," Elon said, his eyes sparkling, clearly indicating that this wasn't an ordinary meeting. "I think you won't want to miss this opportunity." Karen raised an eyebrow. "What meeting?" Elon smiled mysteriously. "It's an opportunity for us to talk about major changes in the healthcare field. I've invited a few very special people to join. And you, Karen, are the one I believe can make a huge difference." Karen felt a twinge of doubt, but somehow there was an irresistible pull in Ellen's invitation. She decided to agree. Surely, there couldn't be anything wrong with attending a meeting like this, right? By the afternoon, Karen and Elon walked into a luxurious conference room at the hospital. The large space was decorated with elegant paintings on the walls and neatly arranged tables, but Karen felt a strange tension in the air. She noticed that the people attending this meeting were well-known figures in the medical field, from top managers to industry experts and even major investors. It felt like she had just been pulled into a serious game. "Hello, everyone." Elon spoke, his voice even but authoritative. "Today we have a special person joining us, Karen, who has managed a large hospital and is ready to experiment with new management methods. I believe she will bring about a major change." Karen could only manage a faint smile as all eyes were on her. She felt a bit nervous, but that feeling quickly faded as Elon continued his speech. "As you all know, the healthcare industry is facing many challenges. From managing resources effectively to improving patient satisfaction, everything requires a major change. Therefore, we can no longer stick to outdated methods. It's time for us to change in order to adapt to the future," Elon said, looking around with a steady, convincing gaze. A middle-aged man sitting at the front with a stern expression spoke up. "So what exactly are we going to change?" "What you're saying sounds good, but is it really feasible in a practical environment?" Elon smiled, not rushing to answer. He turned to Karen. "Karen, could you share your thoughts on this?" Karen was taken aback. She had never prepared for this situation. But then she recalled everything Elon had shared with her, the ideas she had started to experiment with, and it calmed her down. She took a deep breath and stood up, adjusting her coat. "Thank you, Elon," Karen said, her voice clear and confident. "Actually, I believe the changes we need aren't just about adopting new technology or changing work processes. It's about a shift in the mindset of everyone in the healthcare field. People often think that in order to succeed, we need to follow a certain model, but I believe creativity and flexibility are key factors in solving the toughest challenges." The room fell silent as everyone listened intently. Karen continued without hesitation. "We need to create an environment where healthcare professionals aren't just following orders, but where they feel encouraged to be creative, to learn, and to grow. And more importantly, we need to create an environment where patients feel truly cared for, not just in terms of their physical health, but also their mental well-being. That's why I believe a new management system, one that is flexible and human-centered, will be the key to making all the difference." As Karen finished speaking, the room seemed to pause for a moment before a round of applause broke out. It was a young woman, bright-faced and clearly one of the leading experts in the field. She smiled and said, Karen is absolutely right. I've worked in healthcare for many years, but I've come to realize that in the process, we've overlooked the human element. In fact, if we could apply an approach where everyone feels like an integral part of the system, everything would change. Another man and investor chimed in. But do we have the resources to implement these changes? Changing mindsets and the working environment requires significant costs, and we need to ensure that we can maintain financial stability throughout the process. Elon stood up with a confident smile. Yes, change always comes with financial challenges. But I believe that if we start with changing work, processes, and mindsets, the result will be significant long-term savings. And don't forget, if employees work more efficiently and patients are happier, everything will naturally bring financial benefits. This time the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. People began to exchange serious yet hopeful glances. For them, this meeting could be a pivotal moment, an opportunity to reassess the way they worked and look towards a different future. After the meeting ended, Karen felt like she had just experienced a major milestone in her life. She was no longer the rigid hospital manager who only followed processes and principles. She began to understand that true change wasn't about large-scale reforms, but about how we perceive and treat the people around us. Elon smiled at Karen as they left the conference room. Thank you for participating in this meeting. You are an important part of this change. Karen looked at Elon, feeling like she truly understood him for the first time. He wasn't an outsider, but someone who could lead and help her and others change themselves. Thank you, Karen said. And this time she wasn't just a learner. She was ready to lead the change. The next day, Karen stood by the window in her office looking outside. The scenery was the same, the traffic bustling, people hurrying as they did on any other ordinary day. But inside Karen, everything had changed. She felt something different, a new sensation she had never experienced before. It was as though a door had opened, leading her to a new world she had always overlooked. The next night after the meeting, Karen spent the entire night reflecting on what Elon had said. She realized that she herself was the one hindering change. She had always believed that sticking rigidly to principles would ensure everything would be fine, but the reality was different. Everything changes, and if we don't change, we'll be left behind. Karen returned to her desk and began drafting a new reform plan. She wanted to try something different, not only in managing the hospital, but also in her approach to work. She decided to start with herself, changing the way she viewed her job and the people around her. That day, Karen invited Elon to her office, not to discuss work or the reform plan, but to understand more about how he thought. She needed someone to help clarify the doubts in her mind. Thank you for coming, Karen smiled as Elon entered the room. He was still the same man with a cold demeanor, but his eyes were full of curiosity and enthusiasm. Thank you for inviting me, Elon said, his voice warm but full of attention. It seems like you've been thinking a lot about what we discussed yesterday. Karen nodded yes. I've realized that over time I've been too rigid with my work. I thought that following procedures was everything, but perhaps I've forgotten something important. Change. Elon sat down opposite Karen, his gaze filled with empathy. Sometimes we get so caught up in the old ways that we forget that new things are the key to opening the door to the future. Karen fell silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on the computer on her desk. A strange feeling rose within her. Could she really find the courage to change? Could she truly let go of all the principles and standards she had spent years building? Elon noticed her contemplative state and smiled before gently speaking. You don't need to change everything all at once. Change takes time. What's important is that you start with a small decision. From there, everything will naturally change. But I'm afraid, Karen admitted, not hiding the anxiety she felt inside. I'm afraid I'll fail, afraid that these changes won't bring any results. Elon raised an eyebrow and chuckled softly. Fear of failure is perfectly normal, but how will you know if you don't try? Karen felt his spark of realization. She had always been afraid of change, of trying new things, but now hearing Ellen's words, she felt more confident. She decided not to let fear control her anymore. She would try no matter the outcome. At least she would have stepped out of her comfort zone. The next day, Karen announced to all the hospital staff about the upcoming changes. She had carefully prepared a new plan with more flexible working methods, encouraging creativity and reducing stress at work. She asked everyone to contribute their ideas and thoughts on these changes. The scene in the meeting room that day was truly different from the previous ones. The staff, instead of sitting quietly and listening to orders as usual, now participated in the conversation with enthusiasm and energy. They shared ideas, thoughts, and even came up with improvements that Karen had never thought of before. One of the staff, Dr. HOA, hesitantly raised her hand. I think we should try implementing new technologies to reduce the workload of the doctors. That way we can spend more time caring for patients. Another staff member, Technician Min, also confidently added, I think we should organize soft skills training for the staff. Sometimes it's not just about expertise, but communication skills and handling situations that are also very important. Karen smiled, feeling a sense of joy spread within her. This was the first time she felt the unity and creativity of her team. The ideas no longer came only from her. They were contributions from everyone. And it was this realization that made her understand that real change wasn't a solitary struggle. It was a process of collaboration between people with common ideas and aspirations. The meeting ended and everyone left with a different mood. Karen stayed behind in the meeting room, looking at the reform plan on the table. She wondered if she could maintain this resolve in the long term. But then once again she thought of Ellen's words. Change begins with a small decision. She believed that if she persisted and continued to make small changes, with every step gradually it would create a big difference. In the following days, the hospital began to see significant changes. The facilities were improved, but more importantly, the spirit of the staff had transformed. People worked with more passion and creativity. The doctors no longer felt constrained by rigid processes, but were encouraged to come up with new ideas to improve their work. The meetings were no longer stressful hours, but lively discussions with positive ideas and feedback. Karen, in her role as manager, felt that she was no longer alone on this journey. She had found a way to work with everyone, rather than simply giving orders from the top down. She learned to listen and respect others' opinions, and from that every decision became more meaningful than ever. Although there were still many challenges ahead, Karen felt much more confident. She knew that this change wasn't easy, but it had helped her grow. She understood that in order to progress, one couldn't remain stagnant. She had chosen change, and this change would open up a new future, not only for her but for everyone around her. Karen returned to her desk, looking out the window, and once again felt the breeze of change passing by. She smiled, no longer feeling anxious or uncertain. Instead, she felt as though she was standing on a new path, full of promise and hope. She was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead, because she knew that, as long as she remained persistent and dared to change, everything would get better. On one morning like any other day, when Karen walked into her office, she felt like a different person. No longer was she the woman with a frown and a cold demeanor. Now Karen knew how to listen, share, and empathize. She no longer focused solely on numbers, reports, or tasks. She looked at the people, their stories, their emotions. These were the things Karen had never noticed before, but now they allowed her to see an entirely different world within her workplace. The story of Elon Musk about the changes in her leadership style were all valuable lessons she had learned. But above all, what Karen felt had changed the most was the lesson of humility. She still remembered that morning when Elon entered the hospital, not as a CEO but as an ordinary man, simple in attire without any extravagant display. His presence had changed everything, not only for Karen but for everyone in the hospital. Karen stepped out of her office holding a coffee cup in her hand. She wanted to visit the outpatient department to check on the work, but as she approached the door, she encountered a rather ironic situation. A nurse was standing in front of a medicine cabinet looking confused. "Karen, I'm not sure if I've made a mistake, but someone requested a medication that the hospital doesn't have. What should I do?" Karen stopped and didn't respond hastily. She smiled gently and said, "Don't worry, this isn't a big issue. Let me know what medication it is and we'll figure out a solution." The nurse looked at Karen with gratitude. It wasn't because she had solved the problem, but because of the way Karen had handled the situation. In the past, Karen would have reacted immediately, urging her staff to hurry up. But now Karen had learned to calm down, view the problem more calmly, and approach it with ease. At that moment, a group of doctors walked by. They looked at Karen, then looked at each other, and one of them whispered, "Karen seems different today. She's not the same as before." Another doctor, who had never been fond of Karen, smiled and said, "Maybe Elon did something we didn't expect. She's not as arrogant as she used to be." Karen didn't hear their conversation, but she felt the change. She looked at her colleagues, the ones who had once been intimidated whenever she walked in. Now they were beginning to respect her and felt comfortable working with her. She smiled naturally, then continued walking, feeling lighter than ever before. But what made Karen happiest wasn't the change in others, it was the change in herself. She no longer cared about power or proving herself. She realized that a leader isn't someone who stands above all. They are the ones who guide and walk alongside their team through difficulties. One afternoon, when Karen and the hospital staff participated in a small celebration, Elon appeared once again. This time he didn't just come to visit, but to share important insights about the work with everyone. Elon stood on stage looking at the crowd of staff and spoke softly. "You are the heart of this hospital. Not me, not Karen, or anyone else. You are the ones making the difference. You are the reason this hospital exists and grows." Elon's words moved Karen. She didn't expect to hear such words from someone as famous and influential as Elon. She realized that leadership wasn't about directing people according to one's own way, but about creating an environment where everyone could grow and feel important. After the ceremony, Elon walked up to Karen, patted her gently on the shoulder, and said, "Karen, I'm very proud of you. You've changed a lot. But don't forget that humility is always the key in any leadership journey." Karen smiled, feeling the profound reminder from Elon. She knew that her journey wasn't just about improving the hospital, but about learning and growing from her mistakes. Sometimes all it takes is a gentle reminder to change someone. And Karen understood that. She had learned the most important lesson of her life: humility. The next day, when Karen walked into her office, she was no longer the cold manager, with a detailed work plan filled with targets. Instead, she had begun to listen more, not only to her staff, but also to her own emotions. She no longer forced herself to be perfect, but accepted her imperfections and learned to improve every day. This lesson wasn't just for Karen, but for anyone on the path of leadership in the workplace. Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is how we face them and learn from them. Humility is the key that helps us grow and become true leaders. Karen looked out the window where the sunlight shone through the trees, and she knew that she would continue on this path, one full of challenges but also full of hope. She was no longer a manager who only commanded and controlled. She had become a true leader, walking alongside her team to overcome all difficulties and challenges. And the most important lesson Karen had learned on this journey was, no one is perfect. Only when you accept those imperfections can you truly become an inspiring and mature leader. Through this story, we can see a profound lesson about change, humility, and authentic leadership. Karen, from a rigid and unsympathetic manager, gradually realized that leadership isn't about imposing power, but about creating an environment where people can grow and shine. It was humility, the ability to listen, and understanding the emotions of others, that helped her grow and become a true leader. The important lesson we can learn is, leadership isn't about holding power in your hands. It's about creating connections, understanding, and growing together. No one is perfect, and every mistake is an opportunity to learn and grow. Embrace your imperfections, because they are the foundation upon which you can rise and become a great leader. We all have the potential to become influential leaders, as long as we learn to reflect and grow from our experiences, especially from our own mistakes. Never forget that humility is the key to building lasting relationships and creating deep connections. If you found this story meaningful and full of useful lessons, don't forget to hit subscribe to receive more valuable content from this channel. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts, or if you have a similar story you'd like to share. We would love to hear from you. Be sure to share this video with your friends and family, so that everyone can learn and grow together. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.